I pulled into the curved shell driveway of my house in Whispering Pines, HOA tires crunching over the gravel. The board had voted we all pay extra for last spring. 4 unfamiliar cars already crowded the space where my sensible Subaru usually had room to breathe. My stomach tightened as I parked awkwardly behind them. This was supposed to be my quiet Friday afternoon retreat after grinding through mortgage approvals at Coastal Florida Bank all week. The thought of my backyard porch swing, a dog-eared paperback, and the distant crash of waves had kept me sane through endless compliance reminders from the HOA. I stepped out into the salty air and immediately heard voices, too many voices, floating from my own backyard. The side gate stood wide open like an invitation to a free-for-all. Through I glimpsed what could only be described as a wedding arch. My pace quickened as I rounded the corner of the house. The sight that greeted me froze me solid. My carefully tended lawn, the one I'd been fined $250 twice for having blades 0.3 inches too long, had been transformed into a full-blown wedding venue. White folding chairs formed perfect rows on either side of a central aisle. A massive white tent dominated the far corner, and strangers bustled about placing floral arrangements and stringing lights from my porch railings like they owned the deed. And there, in the center of it all, stood Karen Whitaker, Whispering Pines HOA president for the last 7 years, clipboard in hand, directing a man on a ladder toward my grandmother's oak tree. The twinkle lights need to curve gracefully through those branches, she instructed in that syrupy, authority-soaked voice she'd perfected since she first seized the gavel. We want that magical feeling when Brittany and Thomas have their first dance. I remained rooted, watching unnoticed as Karen shifted her attention to a woman arranging white roses. Those centerpieces need to be higher, darling. We want drama. And check if the caterer called back about the seafood option. Brittany simply cannot have gluten near the shellfish. My mind spun. Caterer. First dance. Brittany was Karen's daughter, engaged to Thomas for maybe 8 months, but I hadn't heard a whisper about a wedding, let alone one on my property. Finally, my paralysis broke. I stepped forward, garden stones cool beneath my shoes. Karen's eyes met mine. For just a split second, I caught a flicker of something. Guilt? Concern? Before her face blossomed into that brilliant, practiced smile. Ryan, perfect timing, she called, waving me over as if I were another vendor on payroll. We need your input on the seating chart. The board was thrilled when we finalized these details last month. I struggled to find my voice. What is going on here? Karen's smile never wavered. Oh, didn't the monthly newsletter mention it? We're finalizing Brittany's wedding details. Ceremony's next Saturday. You're just in time to help with the place settings. My gaze swept over my transformed property. This sacred weekend retreat, I'd worked double shifts for 5 years to afford the down payment. Countless declined dinner invites, budget lunches. Also, I could finally have something that was mine. You're having your daughter's wedding in my backyard. The words came out strained. A woman in a sleek blazer approached, hand extended. You must be the generous homeowner I've heard so much about. I'm Vanessa, the wedding planner. The venue is absolutely perfect for what Karen and Brittany envisioned. Generous homeowner. Venue. My eyes landed on a table covered with elegant cream-colored envelopes. I picked one up, sliding out the embossed invitation. The words blurred, then refocused. Joyfully invite you to celebrate the marriage of Brittany Whitaker and Thomas Hale at the Ellis Backyard Oasis, 142 Oakwood Lane, Whispering Pines, Florida. The memory surfaced unbidden. Standing in this very yard 5 years ago, key in hand, trembling with pride as the realtor congratulated me. The months of saving, overtime, the promotion earned through sheer grit, all culminating in my own piece of paradise. Karen's voice had cut through my joy back then at the first HOA meeting. Such a lovely yard for community gatherings, Ryan. We're all family here. Brittany, already sipping champagne, had added, this is perfect for family events. I can't wait to bring my friends down. I'd smiled tightly, already feeling ownership slipping despite my name alone on the deed. Since then, the erosion had been steady. Unauthorized courtesy inspections, where Karen's committee just happened to walk through my gate. Fines for my American flag during election season. No political displays. Neighbors borrowing the yard for photos without asking. The extra key I'd given the board for emergencies somehow multiplying. Messes I cleaned up. Belongings rearranged. Casual disregard for my space. My gentle reminders always met with the same line. We're the HOA Ryan. No need for formalities. Vanessa's voice pulled me back. Karen mentioned you were thrilled to host. We've been working on the details for months. Months. They've been planning this for months without a single conversation with me. Something shifted inside me. A lifetime of being the responsible neighbor, the reasonable one, the one who paid every fine for community harmony. And this was how they repaid me. For a moment, I imagined exploding, tearing down decorations, demanding everyone leave. Instead, an eerie calm descended. "Excuse me," I said quietly, turning toward my car. "Ryan," Karen called after me, voice already rising. "Where are you going? We need your help with the seating chart." I kept walking, keys clutched tight. "Don't be difficult, dear. We have community obligations." The word echoed as I slid into the driver's seat. Obligations. Always my obligations to them, never theirs to me. As I pulled away, I caught Karen's frustrated expression in the rearview mirror, pearls clacking like tiny gavels of rage. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the familiar weight of guilt. Instead, I felt something new taking its place. Determination. I drove aimlessly for nearly an hour before returning to my apartment, fingers still white-knuckled around the steering wheel. The unexpected invasion of my backyard sanctuary played on repeat like a horror film I couldn't shut off. Inside, I dropped my purse, my keys, and collapsed onto the sofa. My phone buzzed incessantly. 3 missed calls from Karen, 2 from the board secretary, and a text from the vice president that simply read, "Call Karen immediately." Instead, I opened my laptop and typed Brittany Whitaker wedding into the search bar. My stomach lurched as results flooded the screen. Karen's Pinterest board appeared first. Dream backyard wedding at Ryan's Oasis, created 8 months ago. 8 months of planning without a single conversation. I clicked through to her Instagram. A post from 3 weeks ago showed Brittany and Thomas toasting champagne on my porch. The caption, "Final venue walkthrough at our generous neighbor Ryan's backyard. Can't wait for our 150 guests to experience this paradise. 3-day celebration." Comments piled beneath. "So wonderful of Ryan to donate his beautiful home. That's what community is for. What a selfless neighbor you have, Karen." My temples throbbed. Donate. I never donated anything. A notification popped up. A private message from Thomas. "Ryan, I'm sorry about all this. I told Karen we should ask you properly. This wasn't my idea." My phone buzzed again. "Karen." I answered, voice tight. "There you are," she chirped. "What on earth were you thinking driving off like that? The wedding planner needs your input on several things." "Karen," I interrupted, "did you know about this? That you were planning your daughter's entire wedding in my backyard without asking me." A pause. "Well, of course the board knew. We all did. It's not like you use that yard much anyway." While she spoke, I scrolled through old emails between board members. One from Karen to the vice president jumped out. "Ryan won't mind about the wedding. He never uses the backyard anyway. Brittany needs this." Vice president's reply. "Should we at least mention it to Ryan?" Karen, "Better not. He might overthink it. You know how he gets. Easier to ask forgiveness than permission." Timestamp, from months ago. "Are you even listening?" Karen's voice cut through. "I have to go," I said and hung up. For the next hour, I dug deeper. The private HOA Facebook group I've been quietly screenshotting for years contained dozens of messages coordinating wedding details at Ryan's place. Board members debating carpooling. Neighbors arguing about extra chairs. Everyone assuming I'd happily offer my yard. I pulled my property deed from the filing cabinet, smoothing the paper with trembling hands. Ryan Ellis, sole owner. Mortgage statements showed payments from my account alone. Every utility bill, insurance payment, and maintenance costs came from my savings. The realization struck with startling clarity. This wasn't about a yard anymore. This was about respect. I searched trespassing laws Florida and HOA authority over private backyard use. The numbers climbed alarmingly. Potential liability for 150 guests, property damage estimates, utility costs. My phone rang. My best friend Marlene, who'd moved out of the neighborhood 2 years ago to escape Karen's reign. Ryan, your backyard for Karen's daughter's wedding? I just got an invitation. Since when are you hosting? I explained, voice growing stronger with each detail. Ryan, Marlene said firmly, you're not crazy for being upset. This is outrageous. What are you going to do? I don't know yet, I replied, but I'm done being the HOA doormat. The next day at work, my coworker, James, noticed my distraction. Family. HOA drama, I explained briefly. He nodded knowingly. Let me guess. They crossed a boundary and expect you to just accept it because community. I looked up surprised. How did you know? Been there. My old board used to borrow my driveway for events. Kept doing it until I changed the gate code and installed cameras. Stand firm, Ryan. HOAs are the worst boundary violators because they think they're entitled to forgiveness. That afternoon, I received a text from my next-door neighbor. Lots of people coming and going from your place lately. Everything okay? The pieces coalesced into a plan. I left work early and drove past the house. I watched from across the street as Karen directed florists carrying arrangements inside my gate, my sanctuary. At the hardware store, I purchased new gate locks and security cameras. The locksmith arrived an hour after Karen's crew left. By sunset, my yard was secure again. Back at my apartment, I composed a careful email to the entire HOA board. Subject, Backyard Access Policy. Please be advised that effective immediately, anyone wishing to access 142 Oakwood Lane must contact me directly for permission. The gate locks have been changed for security purposes. Sincerely, Ryan Ellis. I hit send, then muted my phone as it immediately began to ring. The responses flooded in minutes later. Karen, don't be ridiculous. We're the HOA vice president. Call Karen. She's upset. Brittany's voice message trembled with practiced rage. How could you be so selfish right before my wedding? You're ruining everything. We've been planning this for months. I sent one response. This is my private property purchased and maintained with my money. No one uses it without my permission. Then I silenced all notifications and opened my laptop again. A local tourism article caught my eye. Coastal retreat tours seeking unique private properties for exclusive corporate events. My fingers hovered over the contact form. For the first time in days, a sense of calm settled over me. 3 hours later, I'd created a comprehensive plan with contingencies for every possible Karen meltdown. I documented the current condition of the backyard, calculated fair market rental rates, and prepared a contract that protected my interests. When I finally signed the rental agreement with Coastal Retreat Tours, I recognized the moment for what it was, the point of no return, and I didn't regret it for a second. 2 days later, my phone buzzed for the 17th time that morning. I knew because I'd been counting. Each vibration sent a small tremor through the wooden desk at Coastal Florida Bank, where I'd been trying to focus on a mortgage application for nearly an hour. The screen lit up with Karen's name again, accompanied by a text preview that began, "You're being completely ridiculous." I silenced the phone and flipped it face down. 3 more messages arrived in quick succession, their muted vibrations like angry wasps trapped against the desktop. Trouble in paradise? James asked from the next cubicle, eyes meeting mine over the partition with genuine concern. My HOA discovered boundaries exist, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. They're not taking it well. The elevator chimed. My stomach dropped. Karen strode across the marble tiles of the bank lobby, purposeful gait and rigid shoulders broadcasting her mission to anyone watching. She wore her signature board meeting outfit, blue linen pantsuit, pearls, formidable pumps. She wouldn't, but of course she would. This was exactly what Karen would do. Is that your HOA president? James whispered, sinking lower in his chair. I stood before she reached my desk, intercepting her near the water cooler. Karen, this is my workplace. Apparently the only place I can reach you, she said, voice pitch just loud enough that nearby colleagues paused their typing. Since you've decided to ignore everyone's calls and change the locks without warning, the old Ryan would have immediately guided her to the break room, desperate to minimize the scene. Instead, a strange calm settled over me, like stepping into cool water. We can talk after work, I said. I'll meet you at Bayside Cafe at 5:30. Your daughter is devastated, she continued. The venue is perfect. Do you understand what you've done? 5:30, I repeated, voice lower but firmer. Or not at all. She blinked twice, the gesture almost comical in its surprise. Without another word, she turned and left, heels striking the floor with diminished authority. James whistled low when I returned to my desk. That was impressive. I was as surprised as he was. That evening, I pulled into the parking lot of the Coral Gables restaurant where the board had arranged what could only be described as an intervention. Through the window, I saw them already seated. Karen, the vice president, Brittany, and to my surprise, Aunt Linda, Karen's sister whose disapproval had terrified half the neighborhood since childhood. You don't have to go in, Marlene said from the passenger seat. My friend had insisted on coming when I mentioned the dinner, calling herself my boundary bodyguard. Actually, I said, finding that strange calm again, I do. Inside, Brittany didn't wait for me to sit before launching her attack. My dream wedding is ruined, she announced, eyes already glistening with practiced tears. The alternative venue is half the size and nowhere near the water view. Thomas's family is questioning everything now. The vice president cleared his throat. Ryan, we understand you were surprised by the arrangements, but surely we can work something out. After everything the HOA has done for you, Karen added, voice trembling with restrained emotion. I changed my entire schedule to give this community opportunities. I drove the neighborhood watch for 8 years. I took a slow breath, then looked directly at Karen. Name one time you asked permission before using my backyard. Brittany blinked. What? One time, I continued, turned to the board. Just one example. When you called ahead, asked if I minded, and respected my answer. Her mouth opened then closed. Name one weekend when you left the yard exactly as you found it. I pressed. One occasion when you didn't bring extra people I'd never met. One visit when you actually treated it as my private property rather than the HOA vacation venue. The silence stretched. You can't, I said, voice still quiet but carrying new weight, because it never happened. Karen recovered first. This vindictive behavior is actually, Marlene interjected, setting her phone on the table. I have something relevant. She tapped the screen, pulling up a calendar. Ryan made this request 7 months ago. It showed every time I had asked the board to please call before entering my property. 26 requests in 3 years, each documented with date and response. James had helped me compile the record last week, combing through texts and emails I'd nearly forgotten. The evidence of my ignored boundaries laid out chronologically had been shocking even to me. The vice president shifted uncomfortably. No one's denying there might have been some miscommunications. It's done anyway, I said, cutting through the tension. The backyard is rented to coastal retreat tours for the next 3 weekends, including Brittany's wedding date. The contract is signed. The deposit is paid. Brittany's tears vanished instantly. You what? I slid a folder across the table. The rental agreement, fully legal and binding. That night, I finalized the last details. The tour company agreement sat signed on my coffee table. My lawyer's letter confirming my exclusive property rights was ready to be sent if needed. The security cameras I'd installed were already transmitting footage to my phone. Thomas's text arrived as I prepared for bed. I respect what you're doing, even though I can't say it publicly yet. This wasn't right from the beginning. For a moment, doubt crept in. Am I being too harsh? The remembered image of strangers rifling through my shed during last year's unauthorized community barbecue banished the thought. This wasn't about punishing them. This was about respecting myself. I thought about the years of coming home to moved furniture, borrowed tools never returned, and casual disregard. The night I arrived to find 16 strangers having a party, my personal photos handled by people who didn't know my name. The constant assumption that what's mine is everyone's, except what's theirs remains exclusively theirs. The weight I'd carried for years began to lift. For the first time since buying the house, I felt like its true owner. The day before the wedding, even though I'd said no at that dinner, I watched through binoculars from my parked car across the street as the board transformed my backyard into Wedding Central. The scene unfolded exactly as I'd anticipated. Karen stood in the center, clipboard in hand, directing traffic like a seasoned dictator. The arch needs to be centered perfectly with a water view, she called the two men struggling with a white wooden structure. And those chairs should form a gentle curve, not straight rows. This isn't a high school graduation. Karen's sister knelt by the garden beds, arranging white roses, talking to the flowers as she worked, probably telling them stories about her own perfect, HOA-approved wedding 35 years ago. The vice president followed behind the caterer, nodding at everything while occasionally checking his watch. I checked mine too. 3-2-1. Right on schedule, a white van with Coastal Retreat Tours emblazoned on the side pulled into my driveway. 2 more vehicles followed, parking behind it. 7 uniformed employees exited, clipboards and equipment in hand. Through my binoculars, I could see the exact moment confusion rippled across the board's faces. The tour manager, a tall woman with silver hair pulled into a professional bun, approached Karen with an outstretched hand. Even from this distance, I could read the body language. Karen's spine stiffened. Her head tilted in that particular way it did when something wasn't going according to her plan. I started my car, but didn't drive closer. Not yet. My phone buzzed with a text from the tour manager. We've made contact. Contract presented as instructed. I imagined the scene. The manager showing Karen the legally binding document with my signature dated 3 weeks ago. The reservation for a corporate team-building retreat starting tomorrow morning with setup scheduled for this afternoon. Exclusive use of the property for the entire weekend. My phone erupted with calls. Karen, the vice president, Karen again. I let them all go to voicemail. This moment had been carefully choreographed, and I wouldn't disrupt it by engaging too early. Through the binoculars, I watched 3 more cars pull into the already crowded driveway. Early wedding guests, no doubt. The vice president rushed to intercept them, hands waving in what appeared to be an explanation. One woman put her hands to her face in shock. When Karen finally called for the 6th time, I answered. What did you do? Her voice crackled with barely contained fury. Hello to you too, I replied, voice remarkably steady. There are people here saying they have a contract for a tour group tomorrow at your house. My daughter's wedding is tomorrow. I corrected her gently. My house, not your wedding venue. This is your house, she shrieked. You can tell these people to leave. You never asked me, Karen. The words flowed easily, rehearsed in my mind for days. I bought this house with my money. I maintain it with my money. And I rented it out as I wished. You knew about the wedding. Everyone knew. Everyone assumed. I said evenly. No one asked. This is what happens when you assume rather than ask for permission. You have to fix this. Panic edged into her voice. Call them off. The yard is not available. Not tomorrow. Not for the weekend. I ended the call and watched the chaos unfold. Karen frantically working her phone, probably calling every venue in a 50-mile radius. The vice president shepherding confused guests back to their cars. Brittany in animated conversation with the wedding planner, arms gesturing wildly. An hour later, my phone pinged with notifications. The HOA Facebook group updates shifted from excitement about the most beautiful backyard wedding to confusion about venue complications. A neighbor posted, anyone know what happened to our generous neighbor Ryan's offer? 20 minutes later, Thomas called. His voice sounded different, measured, respectful. Ryan, I want you to know I always felt uncomfortable about using your yard without formally asking. Thank you for saying that, Thomas. After we hung up, I received the first unexpected text from a longtime neighbor. Always thought it strange they'd use your yard without asking. Standing your ground takes courage. The tour company staff continued setting up their equipment. Beach chairs in neat rows facing the water, informational placards about local marine life, a registration table on the front porch. I finally drove away, leaving my property being used exactly as I intended, with permission, with respect, with boundaries intact. For the first time in years, I felt something unfamiliar unfurling in my chest. It felt remarkably like freedom. 3 days later, the doorbell rang, just as I was organizing the last of my documentation. Through the peephole, I saw Karen and the vice president standing shoulder to shoulder, their postures rigid with indignation. I took a deep breath, tucked the final photograph into its folder, and opened the door. "Ryan Ellis," Karen said, voice wavering between fury and tears. "How could you humiliate my daughter this way? Her wedding is in shambles." The vice president stood slightly behind her, disappointment radiating like heat. "After everything the HOA has sacrificed for you, this is how you repay us? By destroying Brittany's special day." I stepped back, gesturing toward my living room. "Would you like to come in?" Their momentary hesitation revealed their surprise at my calm. They'd expected tears or defensive anger, my usual response pattern. Instead, I led them to the couch where 3 water glasses waited on coasters. I'd anticipated this visit for days. "You need to make this right," Karen continued, voice gaining strength as she settled onto my couch. "A public apology at minimum, and you'll need to compensate for the venue change." The church hall was barely adequate. The vice president leaned forward, tones softening into the reasonable voice he used during budget meetings. "Ryan, everyone makes mistakes, but this is the HOA. If you don't make amends, I'm afraid you'll find yourself cut off from certain community privileges. I've prepared something I'd like you to see," I interrupted, sliding a thick blue folder across the coffee table. Karen glanced at it without touching. "What's this supposed to be?" "Documentation," I answered, opening it myself. 5 years of boundary violations on my property. I've organized it chronologically. Their expressions shifted from righteous anger to weary confusion as I began laying out photographs. Wine stains on my grandmother's outdoor rug after an unauthorized small gathering that left 17 empty bottles. Cigarette burns on the deck furniture from Brittany's friends. Muddy footprints across my white patio tiles from someone's dog. "I've been silent for too long," I said, voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. "Every time I asked for respect, you dismissed me. Every boundary I set, you crossed." The vice president shifted uncomfortably. "That's just normal wear and tear." "This isn't normal," I countered, pulling out a stack of receipts. "These are the repair costs. Notice the signatures, all mine. I've never asked for a dime from the HOA. Karen's face flushed. "We're the HOA. We shouldn't need formal invitations or community respects each other," I said, cutting her off with a gentleness that surprised even me. "The yard is mine. My name is on the deed. My money paid for it." I slid forward the property documentation, the mortgage statement, the insurance policy, all bearing only my name. "You had no right to," the vice president began. "I had every right," I replied, tapping my finger on the deed, "just as I had every right to rent it to the tour company." Their eyes widened as I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the security camera footage from 3 months ago. Karen leading 6 strangers through my gate, opening my shed, showing off our community backyard. "This is private property, not an HOA timeshare," I said. "And this," I placed Brittany's wedding invitation on top of the pile, "was planned without my knowledge or consent." Karen's hands trembled slightly as she picked up the invitation. For the first time, I saw uncertainty in her eyes. "If you want any continued relationship with me going forward," I said, pulling out a single sheet of paper, "these are my terms. No one visits without explicit permission. I require advance notice and confirmation. All copies of my gate key must be returned immediately." The vice president's face darkened. "You can't dictate." "I can and I am," I said, meeting his gaze. These aren't requests. They're requirements. The silence stretched between us. Karen stared at the evidence spread across the table, the physical manifestation of years of disregard. I never saw it from your perspective, she finally whispered, something genuine breaking through her defensive shell. The vice president rubbed his face, suddenly looking older. We didn't think it wasn't our intention to. Intent doesn't erase impact, I said, gathering the documents back into the folder. I love this neighborhood, but I won't compromise on this anymore. The power shift was palpable in the room. Their manipulation tactics, the tears, the guilt, the threats of exclusion, lay useless between us like spent ammunition. The vice president reached into his pocket and placed a key on the table. Karen hesitated before adding hers beside it. Brittany has one too, she admitted. I nodded. I'll get it from her. She won't take this well. That's not my responsibility, I replied. As they prepared to leave, Karen paused at the door. Will you come to the next board meeting next week? I met her eyes steadily. I'll let you know by Thursday if I'm available. Something passed between us, a new understanding. She nodded once, accepting this small but significant shift in our dynamics. After they left, I stood in my quiet apartment, heart racing not with anxiety, but with a strange, unfamiliar lightness. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of their expectations lifting from my shoulders. I picked up the keys they'd left behind, symbols of a boundary finally respected, and placed them in my desk drawer. The battle wasn't over. Brittany would be harder to convince than Karen. But for now, in this moment, I'd reclaimed something essential. My yard, my boundaries, my life. 6 months later, the morning sunlight spilled across my deck as I settled into my porch swing, coffee mug warming my hands. My backyard felt truly mine for the first time. No unexpected visitors, no rearranged furniture, no apologetic texts about borrowing the space for the weekend. I ran my fingers along the new cushions I'd chosen last month, soft teal fabric that reminded me of the ocean at midday. The bookshelves I installed now held my favorite novels instead of Karen's forgotten event supplies. Wind chimes tinkled softly from the corner of the porch, a sound that had become synonymous with peace. This is what home should feel like, I whispered to myself, watching a pair of sandpipers dance along the shoreline. My phone buzzed with a text from James at work. Congrats again on the promotion. Bank's lucky to have you in charge of the commercial loan division. The promotion came after I pitched my own restructuring plan. Instead of letting the VP take credit for my ideas, something shifted inside me that day in the conference room when I said, actually, I developed this strategy and would like to present it myself. The confidence from standing up to Karen had spilled into every aspect of my life. Last Saturday, I had dinner with a few neighbors for the first time in months. The conversation felt stilted at first, but they respected the boundaries I'd established. The new HOA president actually called yesterday to thank me for coming rather than assuming we'd meet again this weekend. Some old board members still don't understand. Karen insists I'm holding a grudge, while the vice president maintains the HOA should have unlimited access to everyone's yards. I've accepted that not everyone will adapt to the new normal. Thomas surprisingly calls occasionally. After marrying Brittany at the church hall, which turned out beautifully despite the last-minute change, he seems genuinely invested in building a respectful relationship. Your neighbor is learning, he told me last week. Slowly, but she's trying. The doorbell chimed at exactly 11 o'clock. Brittany stood on my porch, hands clasped nervously in front of her. Thanks for letting me visit, she said, waiting for me to invite her in. We walked to the kitchen, where I'd prepared a simple lunch. She noticed the family photos I'd rearranged on the wall, still present, but no longer dominating the space. I like what you've done with the place, she offered. Settling into a chair, I gestured toward. Our conversation meandered through safe topics until she finally said, I never really thought about how we treated your yard before. I just assumed it was partly ours. I finished her sentence gently. She nodded, examining her sandwich. I'm sorry. The words hung between us, fragile but sincere. At 4 o'clock, she glanced at her watch and stood. "I should go. Thank you for respecting my time," I told her, walking her to the door. Her smile was tentative but genuine. "This was nice. Maybe we could do it again sometime." "I'd like that," I replied, surprised to find I meant it. Later, sitting on my deck with Marlene and 2 new friends from my pottery class, I poured wine into mismatched glasses. We laughed as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in vibrant oranges and pinks. My phone lit up with a text from Brittany. "Thanks for having me over today. Looking forward to next time. With permission, of course." I smiled, setting down my phone to rejoin the conversation. The boundaries I'd built hadn't shrunk my world as I once feared. They'd expanded it, creating space for relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. The ocean breeze carried the scent of salt and possibility as evenings settled around us. For the first time in years, I felt perfectly at home in my own yard.